Donald Trump is launching his most blatant and direct attack yet on Special Counsel Robert Mueller and the Russian investigation. On Wednesday, the president tweeted Attorney General Jeff Sessions should stop this rigged witch hunt right now before it continues to stain our country any further. This is now official White House language for describing a law enforcement investigation approved by the president's own Justice Department and defended by his own FBI director as not being a witch hunt. Press Secretary Sarah Sanders says the president is not obstructing justice. He's just fighting back.
It's ridiculous that all of the corruption and dishonesty that's gone on with the launching of the witch hunt, the entire investigation is based off of a dirty, discredited dossier.
And that last part of her comment was, in fact, a lie. But let's bring in our panel now. Political commentator and host of the Mo Kelly Show, Mo Kelly, Republican strategist Charles Moran, and criminal defense attorney David Katz. Thank you all for being here. David, I'd like to start with you. Let's put aside for a moment Sarah Sanders and Trump's lawyer Rudy Giuliani and everybody else who are trying to argue that that tweet is just the president's own personal opinion. Is that tweet evidence of a crime? Did the U.S. president, in plain sight, do exactly what President Nixon did in private, allegedly using the power of the office to try and shut down a federal investigation into his White House?
Well, I think that a tweet and its contents could very much be the evidence of a federal crime, because the federal crime is attempted obstruction of justice. It's not so much the effect. I found that out as a prosecutor prosecuting people for obstruction of justice. It's the intent. It's the corrupt intent with which the statement or the action is taken. And there were people who said, well, how can I be a person who obstructed justice? I'm here in court being prosecuted in federal court. And the answer is because you attempted to, you committed acts, and you made statements that were indicative of you having a corrupt intent to try to obstruct justice.
Okay, here's the world's greatest lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, trying to explain why there is nothing wrong with that tweet.
He's established a clear sort of practice now that he expresses his opinions on Twitter. He used the word should, he didn't use the word must, and there was no presidential directive that followed it.
Okay, the problem here is that the Supreme Court seems to disagree with Giuliani. All 9 justices agreed that Trump's tweets were to be considered official statements and not the venting of an ordinary citizen. This was in upholding Trump's travel ban. Chief Justice John Roberts wrote, the President of the United States possesses an extraordinary power to speak to his fellow citizens and on their behalf. And Charles, if you're going to peg your defense and your argument on the difference between the words should and must, it seems like you're in big trouble.
Well, again, the situation here is that, you know, the president is expressing his dissatisfaction, his frustration, as many Americans are, about the speed and the depth and the meandering nature of this investigation. The president has a right to be unhappy with the direction, but he did not issue an order for this to stop. He has consistently said that he wants to see this investigation concluded. Need to wrap this thing up. And part of what we saw today was, again, the president expressing that he wants to see not that Jeff Sessions just blatantly pull the plug on it, but we need to wrap this thing up. Mr. Mueller has issued a number of subpoenas. He's indicted several people with the influence of American elections. It's time to get to the point.
But Charles, I mean, Benghazi went for 4 years, Whitewater went for 6. You know, he said the Attorney General should stop this rigged witch hunt. And Mo, you know, this is coming from the President of the United States. He can vent, he can have a temper tantrum, he can say whatever he wants on Twitter. It's still official White House statement.
It's official White House statement, and he's not an impartial observer. He is what I would say the subject of this investigation, and he is asking someone who is a direct report to him, someone that he's appointed and also has recused himself. He can't necessarily stop the investigation, but Jeff Sessions can be fired, and then someone can be hired who can fire Rod Rosenstein and effectively end the investigation. My greatest concern is this president doesn't understand that his words, his voice have a considerable amount of weight that the average individual just does not.
I disagree. He's not the subject of the investigation. The subject of the investigation is Russia. He is not the subject of the investigation. The subject of the investigation is the interference of Russians in the American political system. And everything that we've seen as a result. He is not. No, he's not the subject.
Legally, David, is he a subject or is he a target?
I think so far Trump would have to be called the subject, but he's obviously someone, as are his family members and associates, who could become a target.
Okay. you mentioned the Attorney General has recused himself from the Russia investigation, so technically he can't stop it. It's up to his deputy, Rosenstein. Ultimately, the president could stop it if he wanted to. That was a question which was put to the White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders on Wednesday.
If it is corrupt, why doesn't the president just end it or use the powers he has?
Once again, the president's allowed this.
If he believes that, why doesn't he follow through on it?
Once again, the president has allowed this process to play out, but he thinks it's time for it to come to an end.
Okay, so then, David, explain how all of this, again, goes into the possibility of obstruction of justice.
Well, the possibility of an obstruction of justice by the president or those close to him is that the president is the boss of Sessions. He has the power to fire Sessions. There might be political turmoil, but the reality is he could fire Sessions. And it seems like an effort to cow people under the president's direct supervision and authority, which a cabinet officer certainly is.
Okay, here's one factor which may have sparked the tweet coming from the president. CNN is reporting on Tuesday evening and Wednesday morning. Trump's lawyers updated him by phone on the latest developments of the Russia investigation. One person familiar with the matter told CNN that included special counsel Robert Mueller's latest proposal to secure an interview with Trump, which was delivered on Tuesday. Trump tweeted at Sessions hours after being updated by his legal team. Charles, it's also day 2 of the Paul Manafort trial, the former chairman of Trump's campaign, facing dozens of charges relating to financial crimes, notably before the campaign. But it does seem that maybe all of this, the president is now feeling the heat.
I'm not playing a connect the dots game on any of this. If you look at the Paul Manafort trial, if you're looking at everything that they're doing and thinking they're looking at, it's tax evasion, it's failing to register as a foreign agent when you're representing a foreign government. It's hiding your money in offshore accounts and not not disclosing that. I mean, this is the stuff that people like Al Capone were brought up on, except Al Capone killed people. Paul Manafort is being brought up on a routine charge. And he's being given a lot of undue, a lot of scrutiny because of it. Oh, yeah, it's a lot of money.
It's a lot of charges.
It's a lot of money. It's a lot of charges. Typical charges for something like this are about a year, but I don't see a lot of other people who are also going through these tax evasion cases in federal court being subjected to this type of legal scrutiny. And there is no connection whatsoever or discussion about what's happening in this court case with Donald Trump. This is all about just not paying your taxes or registering as a lobbyist for a foreign country.
Let's not forget the mandate of Bob Mueller. He was supposed to examine the relationship between the members of the Trump campaign and also Russian officials. Now, it just so happens that Paul Manafort has a long history with Russian officials, and he's supposed to investigate any crimes which may be unearthed or may arise during his investigation. We don't need to start and end with only if it relates to the election and Russian meddling.
Okay, you mentioned Capone. The president tweeted about that, an official statement, in fact, saying about Paul Manafort, looking back on history, who was treated worse? Alphonse, spelled incorrectly, Capone, legendary mob boss, killer and public enemy #1, or Paul Manafort, political operative and Reagan doll darling, now serving solitary confinement, although convicted of nothing. Where is the Russian collusion? David, at least we got to see Capone's taxes, which is one difference here. But, to Mo's point, while this trial going forward in Virginia has absolutely nothing really technically to do with Russia because they're not going to mention collusion, it does, in a way, also have everything to do with Russia because they're looking at Manafort and how he operated as a political consultant.
Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, he was the president's campaign chairman. It's really extraordinary that the President Trump's campaign chairman is on trial. That is a remarkable trial, a remarkable situation. And he's not facing 1 year in jail. He's at an age, Manafort, where he's probably going to spend the rest of his life in jail if he gets convicted of these charges. Having said that, he seems to be maybe holding out for pardon, if not holding out to try to be acquitted, because he's in a really ridiculous situation. Most people in his case, if they were not thinking about a pardon, would make a deal with Mueller.
Okay, very quickly, that rally on Tuesday night in Florida. Here's how the president's supporters greeted journalists, in particular CNN's Jim Acosta. Okay, there was a very rare White House briefing on Wednesday. Sarah Sanders essentially said what we all know about the president, that he supports this kind of behavior.
This is a two-way street. We certainly support a free press. We certainly condemn violence against anybody, but we also ask that people act responsibly and report accurately and fairly.
Charles, isn't the guy in the Oval Office meant to be the leader, the moral compass of the country, not the guy encouraging that sort of stuff?
You know, the mainstream media has been tilting in a direction for the last couple of years. I remember being at the floor at the RNC convention in 2008, where Sarah Palin, in her speech, started to evoke the same language, and people turned around on the floor and started, you know, also pointing and holding, you know, the news media there accountable. What we saw at that rally, I have seen repeated. I have seen, you know, it's just part of more of the red meat and part of the conversation about people taking out their frustrations on what they consider to be biased reporting by Mr. Acosta and, you know,
I get that, but let's go back about 500. Go back 500 years. Remember that day, that inauguration day, when Donald J. Trump stood up there and put his hand on the Bible and was sworn in as the 45th president? And this was part of the oath he made.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute
that I will faithfully execute
the office of President of the United States.
The office of President of the United States.
And will, to the best of my ability.
And will, to the best of my ability.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
Okay, well, here's part of the Constitution of the United States. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. Mo, where's the asterisk that says, so long as reporters say nice things about the administration?
Well, I mean, if you can't handle criticism in the press, you shouldn't be president. I've said this many times, and I'll say it again. He's not the president of the United States. He just wants to be the president of his base. And I would say maybe a larger portion of the Republican Party who likes him. He's not interested in defending or condemning that which is abhorrent.
Okay, we're out of time, but come back next hour because we've got a lot more to get to with all of this. It's been a big day in politics, a big day with Paul Manafort trial, and a whole lot of other stuff. So thank you guys for being with us. We appreciate it.